This is Faux-Authentic History.
Hi, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Holly Fry.
And I'm Brian Young.
Brian, how do you feel about pirates?
I like pirates.
You're pro-pirate.
I'm pro-pirate. I have a collection of eye patches I wear on occasion.
I had no idea.
That's not true, but I kind of want it to be.
It can be. I mean, now that you've put that out into the universe, eye patches are coming your way. Pirates are really popular, though, and pirate documentaries are very popular, and they have drawn the attention and fascination of people, pirates in general, for centuries. But in recent decades, as more and more pirate documentaries are released, the idea of piracy has really been romanticized, and the popularity level has kind of soared. And one of the aspects of pirate culture that comes up again and again is the existence of this so-called pirates' code, which serves as a set of rules for how pirates conduct themselves and their business.
While the pirate code's often referenced in these documentaries, no existing copy had ever been found until fairly recently. So it turns out there was an edition of the pirate code, as written down and annotated by Joshua Gibbs, found among the sunken artifacts from the Titanic. It sat patiently at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean, sealed safely in a trunk before its discovery. It's not known who owned the chest containing the book, and after it was discovered, the only known copy of the pirate code passed through a number of hands before it finally landed in an antiquarian bookshop. The shop owner, recognizing what she had, allowed it to be reprinted for our research purposes.
Yeah, so up to fairly recent times, no one really had... There's a big gap in between when anybody had seen the code and modern day seeing the code. So this nicely fills that gap, sort of. But Gibbs's writing starts with this brief history of the Brethren Court, which dates, according to him, all the way back to pre-Hellenic Greece, so before the 5th century BCE. And prior to the Brethren Court, which served as a sort of coalition of leadership among prominent pirate lords, piracy was really a matter of every man for himself. There was no codified system of behavior or business. And there are only 4 meetings of the Brethren Court in the Gibbs writing, which was penned in the 1700s, so it was really pretty rare for them to gather at all.
It was during that first official meeting of pirate lords that the sea goddess Calypso was bound in human form so that men could rule the seas. But that meant that there needed to actually be some rules. So the Second Brethren Court was focused entirely on creating the code. The Pirata Codex was written by Captain Morgan and Captain Bartholomew and was adopted as law by the Second Brethren Court.
And that Second Brethren Court also established the position of Keeper of the Code. That was a pirate who served as an expert and interpreter of pirate law. And in addition to that person, 2 pirates would serve as carriers of the code. That was a lifetime appointment. So that job literally just involved carrying the Pirata Codex and delivering it wherever needed.
The original codex is lost to time, so the version we have is recorded as recalled by Gibbs. And that means there are almost certainly wide discrepancies between our text and the original Pirata Codex. There's no way to tell how far afield the recollected version is. Gibbs makes a note at the beginning of his version that he can't remember all the specific articles, but that his work is largely based on the elements he found most pertinent in day-to-day dealings in piracy.
And his code begins with the Pirate's Pledge, which reads, "All adherent to the code pledge to be bound together as a brotherhood of pirates, sharing in all life's fortunes and troubles. Every member shall have an equal vote in the affairs of the moment and an equal share of the provisions. Every pirate shall obey the code. Anyone who fails to do so shall be marooned on a desert island and left ashore with a loaf of bread or hardtack, a bottle of water, if any exists, and a pistol with 1 load."
The basic rules of pirate society are covered in the text, making clear how the relatively egalitarian social and power structures worked. But beyond guidance for business dealings and the meting out of punishments, the Pirates Code also offers practical advice, including choosing clothing and tattoos, staying healthy, and maintaining a seafaring vessel. So while the code does include rules, it's almost like a lifestyle advice book, except, for pirates.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of fun to see how much it focuses on on things that are not necessarily like how they regulate their ships and how things are run. But one of the things that really stands out when you read this code is just how much structure there is to virtually every aspect of pirate life, starting with the hierarchy of jobs aboard a vessel.
So the captain, of course, is the top boss, like an executive in charge of decisions for both the vessel and the crew, including where they sail and what to do should a crisis arise. The first mate was the captain's assistant and often navigation lead.
The quartermaster served as a sort of executive middleman, relaying information from the captain to the rest of the crew. And this person also managed disputes within the ranks. He also led attacks on other vessels and was in charge of divvying up any spoils or booty that was acquired.
And speaking of disputes, there's apparently a rule that no crew member can strike another while aboard the ship. Disputes that can't be resolved through discussion must be settled on land via sword or pistol. The captain has the option to decide on an alternate manner of resolution apart from those two. If a pirate were to lose a limb during such a conflict, resolution as adjudicated by the quartermaster or captain, he would be compensated under the same compensation table used for loss of limb in battle.
So if you're curious, and I know I was.
I definitely am.
What limbs and other body parts are worth, according to Gibbs's recollection, should you lose them, here they are. So a loss of a right arm was worth 800 pieces of 8. A loss of the left arm was 750. The loss of a right leg was 500. The left leg was 400. Clearly, southpaws are devalued in this society. A general fight wound was worth 100. Loss of a finger had some variation. It was generally 100 was your compensation, 200 if it was your trigger finger, 0 if it's that useless pinky finger. A lost eye was worth 200 pieces of 8, and a lost ear was worth 30 ducats.
Do you think that they could make a case, like if someone was like, hey, this was obviously for dominant hand, not specifically right hands?
Yes, I do think so, because there are notes scribbled in this about individuals that got higher compensation than what's listed in the table. So presumably they either made a case or they had a captain that was generous. So it shifts a little.
So these numbers that Holly just went through, these are mere guides. Captains could award larger or smaller compensations at their discretion. In the event of the loss of a prosthetic limb, the crew member would still be compensated at a rate of at least 1/2 the value of the loss of a natural limb.
Right, so if you had already lost a leg and you had a prosthetic, and then you lost that prosthetic in the course of your pirate duties or in one of these conflict disputes, you would then get compensated for the loss of that prosthetic leg as well.
It's a very basic health plan, it sounds like.
Yeah, pretty much. And then moving on, the bosun was responsible for the ship's colors, as well as the ship's rigging, cables, and anchors. And while each ship had its own unique flag, pirate crews were pretty consistently encouraged to acquire additional colors at any given chance. And that was because false colors could be flown as a means of disguise or to gain the trust of other vessels. And being able to rotate through a collection of false flags could help a ship and her crew keep pursuers confused and unable to get consistent accounts of their whereabouts. So keeping track of all of those various flags aboard any given ship was also part of the bosun's job.
The Master of Arms kept order at sea and was in charge of the brig and any prisoners on board. And the gunner, as you might surmise, had to keep an eye on weapons and ammunition, as well as train the crew to use them.
Crews also included a surgeon to tend to any medical issues and perform routine exams on the crew, a sailmaker to manage the manufacture and upkeep of sails, and of course a cook to see to the crew's nutrition.
One of the additional jobs of the surgeon was concocting replacement limbs for any lost in battle with miscellaneous onboard items, including planking being made available for use as prosthetics.
Yeah, not the high-tech prosthetic situation that you might encounter should you lose a limb today. That was a very makeshift situation.
Here's some pulleys and rope. Welcome to your new arm.
Kind of, yeah. And a captain, according to the code, actually would get elected by the majority vote of the crew. Of course, a captain can acquire a ship and then hire a crew, and it's not made entirely clear in the version of the code that we have, but it seems by virtue of agreeing to be hired, the crew was sort of tacitly voting for the hiring captain to stay the captain. At any time that a captain was deemed unfit, though, another captain could be elected by the crew. And in such cases, the original captain was required to step aside upon being notified of the plan to change leadership. But if a crew ever skipped this notification, the change was considered a mutiny rather than a proper change of captain.
In the event of acquisition of spoils, it's very clearly established how things were divided. Acquisitions were divided into shares, and then those shares were allocated according to position. The captain of the ship got 2 shares. The quartermaster got 1 3/4 shares. The surgeon got 1 1/2. 1 1/4 shares each went to the people holding the positions of master gunner, carpenter, sailmaster, and boatswain. Any other crew members not named by title or position were to receive 1 share each. Also, there's an interesting note in this allocation and division of shares list that the cook's share can be withheld in the event that his food were to kill any of the men aboard his vessel.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. One, that's a lot of math, which I know sounds foolish. I shouldn't underestimate the math skills of pirates. But all of those 1/4 and 1/2 and 3/4 shares, like, it seems to me like there's lots of figuring going on. And 2, like, it makes sense that you want some sort of accountability structure for the cook, but nobody else had any mention of losing their shares should they perform their jobs poorly. So it's kind of...
Yeah, like, so what if the sailmasters, all of his sails just have giant tears in them? Are they going to deprive him of his share?
Maybe, though that's not explicitly spelled out in the code. Going back to food, though, the food plan was that it would always be divided equally among the crew. However, in times of low supplies, rationing would go into effect. And the end of a scarcity or a rationing situation could only be announced after a vote had determined that the majority of the crew felt confident that that scarcity was past. And whether in a rationing situation or a time of just the standard equal divvying up of fresh supplies that they had acquired, any pirate who took more than their fair share would be marooned as a punishment.
Other perhaps more surprising infractions that could merit punishment, though less severe than marooning, included gaming for money, which is surprising, not snuffing candles properly at 8 p.m. and smoking in the hold without a capped pipe. And if it seems surprising that gambling for money was verboten, it's worth noting that gambling for other items of wager was allowed.
Yeah, those last few rules all seem, when you really consider it, to be intended to maintain peace and safety at sea. So having men financially indebted to one another while they are all trapped on a ship for whatever period of time could only bring trouble, I would imagine. Keeping lights out after dark maintained a low profile and made it difficult for a ship to be spotted by enemies. There is a note in the code that if you want to drink, you can go up on deck and drink by moonlight, but you cannot light a candle. And of course, no one should risk a fire at sea, so that whole smoking in the hold made absolute sense as well.
Yeah. So other helpful sections include tips on how to avoid monkey attacks, don't get a monkey angry, don't wear shiny things, and find good hiding places. And more importantly, how to catch fish and how to summon rescue with the signal fire and proper usage of message in a bottle technique.
And those particular pieces of advice are tied really closely to the rule that a pirate that falls behind will be left behind. That, in addition to the fundamentally precarious nature of a life of high seas looting, meant that the odds of being alone in a strange or uninhabited place were fairly high, so these survival skills were really vital.
So, to build a shelter, the code suggests finding a clear area, free of rocks, with some sort of feature that can anchor a temporary domicile, such as a tree, a large boulder, or a side of a hill. And then the text advises collecting as many branches and sticks as you can, using the largest pieces to brace against your anchor object, and then filling in with smaller pieces to create a structure large enough to lie down in. To add protection and insulation, the code's instructions next advise covering the structure first with dry leaves and vegetation, then a layer of wet vegetation, incorporating mud if possible.
Yeah, which insulates the whole thing and kind of keeps it all steady. It's like a handbook for for kid guides might read today. The code also details, and I love this, the many uses of coconut for both sustenance and other tasks. So for coconut milk, it says you should climb a coconut tree and select a green coconut, then remove the husk, then poke holes in 2 of the 3 dark spots that you'll find on one end of it, and that one hole will allow air into the coconut as you pour the milk out of the other hole. And then you can crack that coconut open and roast it in a fire to toast that white meat inside. Another cool thing, I did not know this is a fun piece of advice, mashing untoasted coconut meat as a salve for a sunburn worked great. And you could also use the husk fibers to create rope.
So primer-style notes are included concerning the consumption of possibly less than fresh foodstuffs. For eggs, it instructs the reader to float it in water. An egg that floats is questionable, but can be mixed with rum to be eaten. Additionally, fresh fruit should be eaten any time it's available to help stave off scurvy.
There's also a really simple hardtack recipe that's included for stretching rations in hard times. And according to this recipe, you could combine 5 parts of flour to 1 part of water, or you could use rum if water wasn't available, a spoonful of salt, and a bit of lard or fat. And the measurement for the lard or fat is not included. And once those ingredients were combined, they could be cooked in a skillet until the mixture firmed up into a hard biscuit. And kept dry, hardtack could allegedly last for several months. Brian.
So, I hear that you made some.
Right, like I can't read a simple recipe like that and not try it, so of course I made hardtack. I actually made a couple different batches.
Did you make it with the rum?
No, I didn't, but maybe I'll do that next. So for anybody that bakes that may be listening, if they heard that recipe, it sounded an awful lot like pie crust, and it is. Except when you cook it kind of in a hard cake rather than rolled out flat and thin like a pie crust, it does form this weird little hard biscuit. And the first one I did was with pastry flour and water, and instead of lard, I used olive oil. And I seasoned it a little because I'm a fancy pants with some dried shallot. And I have to say, those were pretty tasty. They were quite yummy. And I did a second batch that I tried with sorghum flour for any of the gluten-free listeners we have. That didn't come out as well. It was a lot more crumbly, which if anybody's ever messed around with gluten-free baking, it's almost always a little bit more crumbly. So I had to add some more water to it, but even so, it didn't get quite the same yummy texture. It was not as delicious. So, hardtack is fascinating. I might make it again because it's actually pretty good. You could put some gravy on it, have a yummy breakfast, get some protein involved. You're set. Anyway.
I very much like to hear how it turns out with the rum. I've never heard of baking with rum instead of water if water's not available. I mean, we just live in a time where water is just available.
Yeah, I'll give it a whirl and report back. And I took pictures of my hardtack, so we can post those if you want.
Oh, absolutely. So another area where nutrition comes up in the code is in relation to illness. For seasickness, it's suggested that the afflicted eat salty crackers or hardtack and green apples if any can be found. In the non-nutritional cures for seasickness, it suggests gazing at the horizon to establish balance.
Yeah, I don't know if that would work or not. I haven't been seasick in a long time. Scurvy, of course, has long been associated with life at sea, so it's no surprise that the code does mention this issue as well. So if bruising begins to appear, particularly on the legs, and if gums and joints are inflamed and your hair begins to thin, scurvy is likely the problem in Gibbs's estimation. So to remedy the situation, of course, commonly known in the modern era, eating citrus is recommended.
As a preventative measure against illness, a bit of hygiene is recommended, and this includes bathing whenever a pirate finds themselves in port, cleaning clothes on occasion, getting exercise to keep the humors in balance, and eating green apples to help clean the mouth.
Yeah, I was surprised that it extolled the virtues of hygiene, because we always think of, there's always that tendency to think of people that live before us as not ever having the same hygiene standards. But there was a whole little note about, if you talk to the ship's surgeon, they will tell you that cleanliness goes a long way to preventing disease.
It's true.
Yeah. So I'm not going to lie, aside from baking hardtack, one of my favorite parts of the code is the section where it talks about how to dress and accessorize. It's just so funny that there was, in effect, a style guide for piracy. And many accessories are touted as being just as useful as they are as an expression of personal style. So, for example, belts can be strung with ammunition or satchels to hold necessities. And a good coat can convey status as well as confer warmth and protection.
Tucked into all of this advice is another little nugget of wisdom. The code warns that loose, baggy clothing, often favored at sea, can easily disguise a woman's figure.
Yeah, heads up, there could be a secret lady aboard. I mean, like, that's so bad. I'm not going to go into it, but, you know. I also left out the thing that says that women are bad luck aboard ships, because I just don't have time for that.
I don't blame you.
Tattoo discussion, which also happens in the code, focuses on selecting markings based on their meaning among pirates. So according to the pirates code, a snake or skull is associated with the underworld or death. A sea creature signifies the peril of life on the water. A rose and thorn stands for strength. And a sparrow, in particular, but almost any bird, indicates freedom and long distances traveled.
Black coal or grease around the eyes is suggested as both a way to darken the areas around the eyes and shield sight from the glare of the sun.
Yeah, it's kind of like, you'll look cool, but also it's sunscreen. So kind of, you know, dual use. The primary message of hairstyling in the code is actually centered around its usefulness as a place to stash weapons or treasures. So as such, dreadlocks and their relatively easy care get quite a bit of praise, particularly for those who do want to keep their hair long. There are also some warnings, however, about the difficulty of maintaining long hair at sea, but it kind of says that if you want to do it, dreadlocks are the way to go.
For a captain, suggested dress includes ornate and expensive fabrics such as velvets, textiles with silk content, and plenty of expensive gold trim. While this may seem to be a frivolous bit of advice, the code explains that all this finery will make clear to anyone that you are a successful captain, which generally means you can be brutal and cutthroat when needed in acquisition of treasure.
Yeah, dress fancy, you'll look mean, apparently, is the rule of thumb. One thing that comes up constantly in the reenactment documentaries that you may have seen about the life of Jack Sparrow is the Right of Parlay. And by those accounts, you would think that parlay was invoked all the time.
For a quick review of what the Right of Parlay actually is, it's a temporary protection that a pirate can invoke when captured by an enemy ship. It entitles the captive to a meeting with the captain so that he or she can negotiate. Now, most of the time, that negotiation would, of course, be for their freedom. Parlay is concluded and the protection is lifted when the negotiations are concluded and any agreements have been carried out.
But the thing is, this really wasn't commonly invoked, and in fact the Pirate's Code makes it clear that a pirate's time is really better spent avoiding situations that would require the right of parlay than maybe worrying about parlay. One of the dangers of parlay is that it requires the captive to be a fairly savvy negotiator to really achieve any sort of beneficial settlement, and captains often outwit captives who use this tactic, so it's kind of a moment of desperation, and you may not be good at it, and you may get in trouble anyway.
So while all of the above certainly would assist a pirate in his personal affairs, no pirate would truly be a pirate if they didn't take to the seas. To that end, the code has extensive coaching regarding knowing about and working on a ship.
Yeah, so if a pirate wanted to know how to get their sea legs, the code had that covered. To walk on a ship without constantly being taken off balance by shifting seas, pirates are advised to walk in a slightly duck-like manner with feet pointed slightly out, knees slightly bent, a fairly wide stance, and a fluid way of moving so you kind of bob with the ship.
A full list of knots and the nomenclature for all the parts of a ship are also included. The code also admonishes not to forget the importance of basic ship maintenance. Crew members, according to the Gibbs writing, should be familiar with all of the tasks required to keep a vessel in good working condition.
Yeah, for one, according to this, it should be beached every few months, and its hull scrubbed for barnacles and other accumulated debris. Second, wood surfaces should receive periodic varnishings to keep them water resistant. Planks should be inspected for gaps, and they should be caulked and tarred by pushing a thin piece of cord, which is what he calls caulk, into any gap and sealing it with hot liquid tar. So it's not caulking like we would go out and buy from the hardware store. It's you caulk it with cord and then you seal it with the tar.
So finally, sails should be examined regularly, and any stitching required should be done in a timely manner.
Of course, meteorological knowledge has always been a vital part of life at sea, and to that end the code involves a number of rather charming rhymes and sayings to help sailors assess and predict the weather. And these include, "A ring round the moon shall bring rain or snow soon," "If the salt is sticky and gains weight, 'tis sure to rain before too late," and "Fish bite least when a wind comes from the east."
And the non-rhyming, but no less useful, "Expect a storm when ropes are hard to untwist or candle wicks smolder, and when seagulls move inland quickly, batten down the hatches."
Yeah, sorry you ended up with the non-rhymey ones.
No, that's fine. Hey, I had to do all of the poems and all the other ones we've done.
There you go. And finally, there is the matter of luck in a pirate's life. So superstition, it seems, has always been part of a seafaring lifestyle. So, of course, there is a brief section on fortune and the wills of the powers that be. And some, but not all, of the wisdom imparted is as follows.
Always board a ship from the starboard side, even if it's inconvenient, and then turn immediately to leeward to avoid bringing bad wind with you onto the vessel.
Don't whistle on board, lest you invite bad wind or spirits.
An overturned bowl portends an overturned boat.
And a piece of silver under the masthead and a piece of gold under the keel will make for a safe voyage.
So now that you've got some of the finer points of wisdom from the Pirate's Code, as recollected from the Pirata Codex, you too can manage safe voyage should you travel through time to the 18th century seas.
Yeah, who doesn't need that kind of information? I mean,
well,
I now know how to make hardtack, so I came away with new skills.
That's what it's all about.
So if any pirates show up, I can feed them an authentic pirate meal.
You just hardtack and rum.
Yeah.
That's a staple at the Fry household.
It might be now. I mean, I'll have to switch it up, but it'll be fine.
So we don't have any mail at the moment. But if you want to send us mail, you can do that by going to fauthentichistory.com and using our contact form. We love hearing from you.
Indeed. Write us when you get the urge.
And did you have anything else, Holly, for us?
I don't. Okay. Happy sailing, should you wish to do so.
So tell us where people can find you.
I am on Twitter at surliestgirl. That's probably the easiest. And then you can find us at, is it Fauthentics? Is that what we...
Yeah, we're at Fauthentics on Twitter.
Yeah, we're at Fauthentics on Twitter. What about you?
You can find me at Swankmatron on Twitter, and you can find the show at fauthentichistory.com and our Facebook by searching Fauthentic History. So that's it for another episode, and thank you, Holly. This was a great one.
Thank you. You're always such a good sport.